So I'm a 33-year-old guy, and for the last 12 years, I've had zero contact with my dad's side of the family. This all started when my dad remarried, a big shift that happened when I was just about 10. Back then, my parents split because, well, they just weren't in love anymore. Even though I get it now, as a kid, it really shook me up. I felt a mix of shock and heartbreak, which led me to act out a lot. We even tried family counseling to smooth things out, but it mostly felt like only my mom was trying to get me. My dad? He was more about just dealing with things as they come, which made me feel pretty distant from him. I mostly lived with my mom and only stayed with my dad for short periods. Things took a harder turn when I was 15. My mom tragically passed away in an accident, and I had no choice but to move in with my dad full time. Honestly, those were some of the darkest days for me. It seemed like I was the only one who really missed her. My dad had been with his girlfriend, Emily, who's now 48, for a few years by then. They got engaged right around the time my mom died, which made things even tougher for me. It felt like my dad was moving on too fast, focusing on his new life with Emily and not showing any real sadness about losing mom. That left me feeling pretty alone during my teenage years. Living with Emily was no picnic either. She jumped right into trying to be the new mom in the house, setting rules and expecting me to fall in line. But how could someone just step in and act like they could replace my mom so quickly? It just didn't sit right with me. To make things even more complicated, Emily had a son, Mike, who's now 31. She was always trying to give him the upper hand, whether it was a better position on the football team or a bigger role in the school play. Sure, Mike wasn't totally cool with how his mom favored him, he'd even call her out on it, but he still enjoyed the perks of her efforts. My teen years were a mess of emotions, dealing with the loss of my mom, a dad who wouldn't stand up for me against Emily, and a stepbrother who was nice but kind of awkward around me. I decided early on that I just needed to keep my head down, get through college, and then I could start my own life on my terms. I ended up going to USC, which was great because it was still in my home state, and to save money, I stayed at home. Both my dad and Emily were cool with it, as long as I pitched in a bit for rent and groceries. It wasn't like I was freeloading, I was doing my part to help out while focusing on my studies. However, back then, I was completely blindsided by my dad, sitting me down one day and saying, "Son, we had agreed that you would stay with us during your college years, but something has come up. Emily and I feel like you're distracting Mike with your activities and friends that you bring over. And because of that, we need to come to a new agreement." When I heard this from him, I got really confused, not knowing the context. I thought he might have been referring to my friends that came over to play games on my WY every now and then. Or perhaps I was being too loud that night with music. I had no idea. And I asked him, "What do you mean, Dad? My friend's being a bad influence on Mike. I swear we haven't taught him anything wrong. And most of the time we stay out of each other's way, right?" He replied, "Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about, OP. I think that you and I both know that Mike has strong feelings for Evelyn. What we were thinking is maybe you could break up with her to keep peace in the family. I mean, we don't think that a girl should mean more than your brother's well-being, right?" I laughed out loud when I heard this. It was by far the dumbest thing I had ever heard in my life. Still chuckling, I went, "Sure, Dad. Why don't I break up an amazing relationship? Because your kid doesn't know how to take no for an answer. I've already told him tons of times that he makes Evelyn uncomfortable, and I barely bring her over anymore. What is the problem anyways?" I knew he was beating around the bush, but I was starting to realize that Mike had gone all gung-ho with a "if I can't have a nobody can" attitude. And Emily had probably asked Dad to talk to me about it to appease her son and also make sure he doesn't waste any more time over this girl. I have no clue how they expected me to roll over on this, though. It blew up into a huge fight, and I ended up choosing to stick with Evelyn and move out of the house. I packed my bags one day and left, changing my cell number in the process to I crashed at a friend's place for a few days and eventually moved in with my girlfriend. Thankfully, I was in college on scholarship, and my main struggles came from paying for rent and utilities. But I hustled and work nights to make it happen. At this point, all bridges had been burned with my family, and the only people I consider family currently are a few relatives on my mom's side. It's been 12 years since then, and guess what? Evelyn and I got married, and both of us are quite comfortable in our jobs and lives. In fact, we bought our first house and are trying for a baby. I genuinely think leaving my toxic family behind was the best decision I made. However, a couple of days ago, someone showed up at my doorstep, and that made me spiral and think back to my past a little. Mike somehow found out where I lived and came over to visit one day saying that he needs to talk to me. I was too shocked to really react, and silently let him in after he made himself comfortable. We caught up a little, although he already knew the general gist of my life because he had apparently found out through social media. Then he told me the real reason he was here. He explained a lot of things about his infatuation with Evelyn, including his mom's involvement. However, he also added that he never wanted me to move out of the house, and that was something that Emily had devised all on her own. He said that his stepdad, a mom, seemed almost glad that I was gone, and the house became really cold and weird after that for him. The three of them ended up moving out of state a few months after I left, something which I wasn't aware of, and Mike didn't know how to reach out to me back then. In all this time, he had been feeling guilty for the way I had laughed and had gotten over his infatuation with Evelyn. Surprise? Surprise. But due to his shitty mental state, had ended up mixing with the wrong crowd in college and ended up dropping out. The situation at home was terrible as well, and his mother was losing her mind over his lack of drive and success, without ever really bothering to find out why he was feeling so depressed. This eventually drove him to leave the house after 10 years back, and he's been wandering the states working random odd jobs and hitchhiking. He came to me to ask if I wouldn't help him out by settling in this town, perhaps by helping him get a foot in the door at the place I work at. For someone with no degree and no qualifications, this would be tough, and I made that clear. But Mike said that I owe him this for abandoning him without toxic family. He claims that even though we were distant, we were still brothers. He left about an hour back. As I'm writing this post and I'm torn, I don't think I owe him any obligation. But it's terrible to see him like this. I spoke to Evelyn about it and she would prefer staying. No contact with all members of my family, including Mike, but feels like we should help him out in some way, at least. Would I be the a-hole if I don't continue interacting with my stepbrother? Update 1. So after reading through all of your comments and thinking about this whole situation with Mike, I've kind of made up my mind on what to do next. I think the best plan right now is to help Mike get started on his own a bit. I'm going to give him some cash to cover a cheap apartment for a few months. That way he has a place to stay and some time to figure things out without stressing about where he's going to sleep each night. Plus, it's kind of like pushing him a little to stand on his own feet, because I'm also going to tell him he needs to start looking for a job on his own. It's time for him to take some responsibility, you know? I'm not really sure if Mike and I will ever have that close, brotherly bond. I mean, things have been pretty complicated between us, and maybe they always will be. But you guys made some really good points in your comments. I don't actually owe him anything when it comes to sorting out his own feelings and the stuff he's going through. It might sound a bit tough, but it's the truth. I did what I had to do for my own peace of mind and my own life. Giving him some help now is just me trying to be fair and give him a chance to get on his feet. So yeah, that's the plan. Help him out a little, but also make it clear that he's got to start pulling his own weight. Hopefully this helps him get started on a new chapter, and who knows? Maybe things between us will get better over time. But for now, I'm just focusing on doing the right thing without getting too caught up in all the emotional drama. Thanks for all your advice. It really helped me see things clearer. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been a few months since I last filled you in on what's been going on with Mike and me. Well, a few months have passed, and I gotta say, Mike's really started to find his groove here in town. It's like he's a whole new person compared to who he was before. He's landed a job as a junior manager over at the local Walmart, which is pretty cool for him. The bit of money we gave him to help him get started has really done wonders. He's been using it wisely, and now he's even going to night school to get a degree. I'm really proud of him for taking these steps. It's kind of awesome to see him turning his life around and getting serious about his future. And honestly, watching his progress kind of makes me want to be more involved in his life, maybe help him out more or just be there for him. But there's still this one thing that's kind of bugging me. Even with all the positive changes, Mike still acts like I owe him something because I moved out earlier and he felt left on his own. Sometimes he even brings it up in a way that makes me feel guilty about the decisions I made. It's a bit frustrating because, I was just doing what I thought was best for me at the time. I talked to some of my relatives about this whole situation, and they think I should just face it head on and have a real talk with Mike about all these feelings. They think a good, honest confrontation might clear the air. I'm not usually the confrontational type, but maybe they're right. It might help get rid of this weird tension and help us move on, you know? So that's where I'm at right now. Thinking about sitting down with Mike, laying it all out, and hopefully sorting things out so we can both feel good about our relationship. It's not easy, but hey, that's family for you, right? Always a bit of drama, but also a lot of opportunities to grow closer if you handle things right. Thanks for sticking with me through this update, and I'll be sure to let you know how the talk goes. Update 3. I finally had that talk with Mike. It was about time I let him know why I think it's not cool for him to expect stuff from me just because of our past. But even though I had to lay down some hard truths, I've got to say, I really do think he's turned into a decent guy. He's changed a lot, and he definitely deserves some respect and, yeah, even some love from me. The chat was a bit intense, and it took Mike a bit to really get the whole picture. You know, understanding the subtle stuff, like why it's not okay to hold on to those old expectations. But he got there in the end. And you know what? He actually apologized. He said he was sorry for putting that unfair burden on me, and he even thanked me for all the help I've given him. That felt pretty good, not gonna lie. And there's more good news. Evelyn, yeah, she's had her issues with Mike too, especially because of some weird vibes he gave off in the past. Well, she's also coming around. Mike went to her, all on his own, and apologized privately for his past behavior. That took guts, and I really respect him for that. Evelyn softened up to him a lot since then, and it looks like things are finally starting to smooth out. So it looks like Mike's going to be welcome in our house from now on. It's a big step, and I'm kind of hopeful about where things are heading with him. As for his mom and my dad, that's a whole different story. Let's just say Mike and I are on the same page there. We both can't stand them, and that's putting it mildly. So yeah, they're not exactly on our favorite people list, and I doubt that's going to change anytime soon, lol. Anyway, that's the update for now. It's been a roller coaster, but it feels like things are moving in a better direction. Thanks for all the support and advice. It's really helped me handle this whole situation. I'll keep you all posted on how things go from here. Update 4. Just when I thought things with Mike were starting to smooth over, life decided to throw another complication our way. So yesterday was just another typical day at work for me. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual hustle. Midway through the afternoon, my phone rings, and it's Evelyn sounding more upset than I've heard in a long while. She tells me Mike came over to our house unexpectedly. Now we had an understanding with Mike that he needs to let us know beforehand if he wants to drop by. Common courtesy, right? But there he was, showing up without a heads up. Here's where it gets complicated. Mike didn't just come over for a casual visit to catch up or something lighthearted. After a bit of uneasy chit-chat, he starts into this intense confession. Turns out he's still got feelings for Evelyn. Yes, that's right. After everything that's gone down, this guy hasn't let go of his old crush. But that's not all. He goes on to ask Evelyn if she would consider giving him a chance, basically suggesting they could be something more. Evelyn, being the rock star that she is, shut that down immediately. She told him straight that it wasn't happening, that she was fully committed to our marriage, and that his feelings were completely inappropriate. But Mike didn't take the rejection well at all. He started arguing, getting visibly agitated, and even stepped towards her in a way that was way out of line. Thankfully, Evelyn managed to handle the situation and kicked him out before things could escalate. She even had the foresight to record the whole ordeal on her phone. When I heard about this, I left work right then and there, furious and ready to confront Mike. But by the time I got home, he had already left. I was absolutely livid, unable to think straight. After all the discussions, the efforts to rebuild some sort of trust and brotherly bond, it felt like we had just taken a massive step backward. Evelyn was understandably shaken by the ordeal, and I was left scrambling, trying to make sense of Mike's actions and figure out what our next move should be. Now I'm stuck wondering how to handle this whole mess. Do I confront Mike directly? Should we just cut ties completely this time? It seems like every attempt at mending our relationship ends up being undermined by another issue. And now, there's the added problem of his inappropriate behavior towards my wife. The whole situation is a mess, and honestly, I'm struggling to see a clear path forward. So, that's the update. It's yet another twist in the saga that's my relationship with my stepbrother. If anyone has any advice or has been through something similar, I'd really appreciate hearing your thoughts because this is just more than I ever anticipated dealing with. Update 5. After the last incident with Mike, where he unexpectedly showed up at our house and confessed his feelings for Evelyn, which quickly escalated into a confrontational and uncomfortable situation, my initial reaction was anger. I mean, boiling point, seeing red type of anger. It was a lot to process, and in those first few hours, all I could think about was finding Mike and confronting him face to face, maybe even physically. I was that upset. I spent the better part of that evening driving around town, checking some of the usual spots I thought he might show up at, but Mike was nowhere to be found. It was like he had dropped off the face of the earth right after stirring up this storm in our lives. The more I couldn't find him, the more my frustration grew. It felt like he had just thrown a grenade into our lives and skipped town before the fallout. After several hours of this fruitless search, I came home to Evelyn. Seeing her so shaken up by what had happened and discussing it further helped snap me back to reality. I realized that trying to handle this through a physical confrontation wouldn't solve anything and could actually make things worse. Evelyn, ever the voice of reason, suggested we take a more constructive approach. We talked it through and agreed that the best course of action was to use the legal system to ensure our safety and set a firm boundary that Mike couldn't cross. She reminded me that we had the entire incident recorded on her phone, which captured not just his inappropriate confession, but also his aggressive behavior afterward. The next morning, with a clearer head and a heavy heart, I went to the police station to file a report. It was a tough decision. fraught with mixed emotions. On one hand, Mike was, at one point, someone I considered family, albeit a complicated and strained relationship. On the other hand, his actions had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I handed over Evelyn's recording to the police, and they watched it intently, taking notes. The officers were quite supportive. They understood the severity of the situation and began the process to look into it right away. They mentioned that this evidence could potentially lead to a restraining order, depending on how things unfolded legally. Filing the police report felt like a necessary step towards reclaiming some sense of security, but it didn't come without its emotional toll. It marked a definitive end to any lingering hopes I might have had about reconciling with Mike. As I left the police station, there was a part of me that felt relieved. Relieved that we were taking concrete steps to protect ourselves and that the law was on our side. But there was also a profound sense of sadness, a recognition that the familial bond I once hoped to salvage was now beyond repair. The drive back home was a quiet one, with me just trying to process all the feelings swirling inside. Back at home, Evelyn and I had a long talk about everything that had happened. We discussed our next steps and how we would handle things moving forward. It was clear that our relationship with Mike had reached a point where the only interactions, if any, would be through legal channels. We were both on the same page about wanting no further contact with him unless absolutely necessary. The reality of cutting someone out of your life so completely, especially someone who was once considered family, is a stark and harsh one. Yet, for our own well-being, it felt like the only viable option left. These past few days since filing the report have been a bit of a waiting game. We're waiting to see how the legal process pans out, waiting to hear back from the police, and just generally waiting for some semblance of normalcy to return to our lives. This entire ordeal has taken a significant toll on both of us. There are moments of anger, moments of profound disappointment, and moments where the whole weight of this situation just feels overwhelming. Despite the turmoil, there have been some small silver linings. Evelyn and I have found a renewed strength in our relationship through dealing with this together. It's reminded us of the importance of supporting one another and standing united in the face of challenges. We've also been incredibly grateful for the support from friends and a few family members who are in the know about the situation. Their words of encouragement and offers of help have been a small beacon of light in what has otherwise been a very dark period. Update 6. After my last update, where I shared about filing a report against Mike following his unexpected and aggressive behavior, things progressed more rapidly than I expected. The police were quite efficient once they had all the evidence, including the recording from Evelyn's phone. They managed to track down Mike, and based on what had transpired, along with their own investigations, he was arrested. This wasn't an outcome I had ever hoped for, but his actions left us with no other choice, and part of me felt relieved that there was a measure of safety in knowing he couldn't just show up at our doorstep again. But barely had I started to process this, when another unexpected twist came our way. My phone rang one evening, and the display showed a name I hadn't seen in over a decade: my dad. The sight of his name stirred up a whirlpool of emotions, from old anger to a flicker of hopeful curiosity, wondering why, after all these years, he decided to call. I answered the call, a decision driven partly by those flickering hopes that maybe, just maybe, this could be a step toward some reconciliation or understanding. But those hopes were quickly dashed the moment I heard the tone of his and Emily's voices. There was no warmth or regret for the years of silence, no gentle easing into conversation. Instead, they dove straight into the issue at hand, as if the past 12 years of distance and silence had evaporated into thin air. They immediately launched into a tirade about how ridiculous it was for me to press charges against Mike, demanding that I drop them. Their words were forceful, insistent, as if they had any right to dictate my actions after everything that had happened. And as if that wasn't enough, they threw in an accusation against Evelyn, claiming she had somehow set Mike up, that she had manipulated the situation to make him look worse than he was. The accusation was not only baseless, but also deeply insulting. The shock of their audacity made my blood boil, but more than that, it brought back all the reasons why I had distanced myself from them in the first place. Here they were, after a 12-year hiatus, still trying to control and manipulate, still expecting me to bend to their will without question. It was as though they expected me to just fall back in line, like the old days when I didn't know any better than to follow their lead. I managed to keep my voice steady, though inside, I was a tumult of anger and disappointment. "So now you want to talk," I said, my words laced with disbelief and a cold anger. I didn't wait for their response. I told them never to contact me again, and ended the call before they could say another word. Hanging up on them felt like closing a door, a heavy, ironclad door, on a part of my life that had long caused me more pain than peace. It was a definitive move, one that said no more to manipulation, to emotional blackmail, and to relationships that brought more hurt than healing. Evelyn was right beside me, her presence a steady comfort. We talked it through, and she agreed wholeheartedly that we didn't need that kind of negativity in our lives, that our well-being and our peace were too important to compromise. The aftermath of that call left me with a lot to think about. I spent long hours into the night reflecting on what family means, on the bonds we choose to keep, and those we choose to sever. It's clear to me now more than ever that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about who stands by you, who supports you, and who respects your choices. It's about the people who are there for you in your darkest hours, who lend strength when you're weak, and who celebrate with you in your happiest moments. In the days since, as we wait to see how the legal proceedings against Mike unfold, I found a certain clarity. It's a clarity that comes from making tough decisions that prioritize our safety and mental health. It's not been easy, and there are moments when the weight of everything feels overwhelming. But there's also a sense of rightness in knowing we are taking steps to protect ourselves and to build a life surrounded by people who genuinely care. The support from friends and the few family members who have stood by us has been invaluable. Their words of encouragement and their presence, whether physical or through messages and calls, have helped buoy my spirits. It's reminded me that while we may have had to close the door on certain relationships, we've also opened the door to others, to people who have shown us what true family looks like. Update 7. Hey everyone, I've got quite the mix of updates to share with you today, and I'm starting with some really wonderful news amidst all the challenges we've been facing. Evelyn and I are expecting a baby. Finding out we're going to be parents has brought a bright new dimension of joy and anticipation into our lives that's hard to fully put into words. It's a profound moment for both of us, filled with hopes and dreams about the future we're going to provide for our child. This joyous news comes as a beacon of light, especially considering the tumultuous period we've been going through. It's like a promise of renewal and positivity when we've been surrounded by so much negativity. Planning for the arrival of our baby has given us a beautiful focus, a project filled with love and excitement, from discussing potential names to imagining what our little one will look like and planning the nursery. On the other end of the spectrum, we're still dealing with the ongoing legal situation involving Mike. The process has been slow and often draining. We recently met with our lawyer, who provided an update on what to expect going forward. Based on the evidence and charges, Mike could be facing between 5 to 7 years in prison. It's a heavy reality, one that carries a mix of emotions for us. Despite everything that has happened, there's no joy in seeing someone I once considered family facing such a harsh reality. It brings with it a somber reflection on how things escalated to this point and the series of choices that led us here. Throughout this legal maze, our focus has been on maintaining our integrity and ensuring our safety. We've been attending hearings and staying in close contact with our legal team to stay informed of every development. The gravity of the legal proceedings is a stark contrast to the lightness and joy we feel when focusing on our expected child. This duality of experiences has been a strange journey, preparing for a new life while simultaneously dealing with aspects of my past that I wish could have turned out differently. Evelyn has been incredible through it all. Her strength and resilience have buoyed me on the harder days, and her excitement about our baby is infectious. We've been spending a lot of time talking about how we want to raise our child. Values like kindness, understanding, and strength are at the forefront of these discussions. We want to create a nurturing environment, one that is vastly different from the tumult and strife that have characterized some of my familial relationships. As we prepare for our new arrival, we've also been consciously deciding to keep our distance from toxic relationships. The clarity that comes with expecting a child has reinforced our resolve to protect our family's peace. We've been rearranging our home, setting up a nursery, and reading all sorts of parenting books, each activity strengthening the bond between us and reinforcing the excitement for our family's future. Reflecting on family dynamics, I've come to appreciate even more the support from friends and the few family members who've been there for us. Their support has been a consistent reminder that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about who you choose to have in your life, who supports you, and who shares in your values. This network of chosen family has been instrumental in keeping us grounded and focused on what truly matters. Looking ahead, the arrival of our child feels like a new chapter, one where we can focus on creating positive memories and building a legacy of love and respect. It's a chance for us to turn the page on past difficulties and look forward to the joys of parenthood. Despite the ongoing legal situation with Mike, which we will continue to handle with the seriousness it deserves, we are increasingly looking forward to the future with optimism. Balancing the preparation for our baby with the legal procedures has not been easy. There are days when the stress seems overwhelming, when the slow pace of legal proceedings feels frustratingly at odds with the rapid preparations for our new arrival. Yet these challenges have also brought us closer together, solidifying our partnership and our commitment to our family's well-being. I'm deeply grateful for the community of friends, both online and in real life, who have offered words of encouragement and support through these times. Sharing this journey with you has provided not just a cathartic outlet for me, but has also offered perspectives and advice that have been invaluable. As we move forward, I'll continue to update you all on both the joyous and challenging aspects of our life. Your engagement and support have been pillars of strength for us, and I look forward to sharing more about our journey into parenthood and beyond. Here's to hoping that the next updates will be filled with more joy as we get closer to welcoming our new family member into the world. Thank you all for sticking with us through thick and thin. Your encouragement and insights have been bright spots in an often difficult journey. Last update. Firstly, the most wonderful news. Evelyn and I welcomed our beautiful baby into the world. The arrival of our child has been nothing short of miraculous, transforming our lives in ways we never could have imagined. Every cry, every smile, reaffirms our decision to focus on building a nurturing and loving environment away from past negativity. Seeing Evelyn embrace motherhood with such grace and love has only deepened my admiration and love for her. She's been incredible, and watching her with our baby makes every challenging moment we've endured together worth it. In parallel to the joy of new parenthood, the conclusion of Mike's trial has also been a significant part of our recent lives. After what felt like an eternity of hearings and waiting, the court handed down a sentence of 6 years. It's a substantial period that reflects the severity of his actions. On the day of the sentencing, I managed to have a brief conversation with Mike. I expressed my hope that he uses this time to genuinely reflect and perhaps find a new direction for his life. The exchange was brief and heavy with unspoken emotions: regret for the paths taken, sorrow for the familial bonds broken, and a somber acceptance of the reality we now face. This closure, though necessary, wasn't celebrated. It felt more like an acknowledgement that some chapters in our lives had to be closed, not with joy, but with a quiet resignation to protect our future and focus on the positives that we can control. It also marked a definitive end to any remnants of hope for reconciliation with Mike or my father and Emily. Their absence in all recent events only cemented our resolve that distancing ourselves was the right choice. Reflecting on this, the concept of family has profoundly shifted for me. I've learned that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the bonds you choose to nurture and the commitment to support each other through life's trials and celebrations. Evelyn and I have felt this shift acutely, deciding to invest our energies into relationships that bring positivity and growth, both for ourselves and for our child. Our baby's future is what drives us now. We've been imagining all the firsts we're going to experience: first steps, first words, first birthdays. We're planning the kind of upbringing we want our child to have, emphasizing kindness, respect, understanding, and above all, love. We hope to instill values that encourage our child to embrace diversity, seek understanding, and act with compassion towards others. As we adjust to our new roles as parents, our home has become a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, even amidst the sleepless nights and the steep learning curve that parenthood inevitably brings. We've transformed one of the rooms into a vibrant nursery, picking out colors and themes that we hope will inspire creativity and happiness in our child. Each choice, from the books on the shelf to the toys in the crib, has been made with so much thought and anticipation. Moreover, our discussions often turn towards how we will discuss our past with our child when the time comes. We agree that honesty, framed in a way that is age-appropriate and constructive, will be our guiding principle. We want our child to learn from our experiences, to understand the complexities of human relationships, and to know that while life can sometimes be challenging, there is always a path toward healing and happiness. During this transitional time, the support from our community, both locally and online, has been incredibly uplifting. Your comments, stories, and words of advice have not only helped us navigate the tougher times, but have also celebrated our victories with us. This virtual diary has become more than just a series of posts. It's been a shared journey that has connected us with so many wonderful people. Looking forward, while I may not update this specific thread anymore, the journey certainly doesn't end here. We're just beginning this incredible adventure of raising our child, discovering the world anew through their eyes. I hope to continue sharing parts of our life in other ways, perhaps focusing more on the joys and challenges of parenting, and less on the conflicts of the past. In closing this chapter, I want to express my deepest thanks to all of you. You've been with us through some of the most difficult and the most beautiful moments of our lives. Your engagement has not just been a source of comfort, it's been a beacon of hope, reminding us of the goodness and support that exists in the world. Here's to new beginnings, to the adventures that await, and to all of you. Thank you for being a part of our journey. Your support has meant the world to us, and we look forward to sharing the next chapters of our lives with you, filled with as much hope and happiness as we feel now.